because Nick sent some questions out. I think the most eccentric person.
Yeah, I mean,
the worst gig. I'll give you my worst gig.
Or heroes. Have you met your heroes, and did they meet?
Yeah. Well, interestingly enough, the answer to the first three questions for me is almost the same person. The worst gig I've seen by far, light years worse than any, even Richard Hell and the Voidoids, worse than them, was Bob Dylan in Sydney with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. And Knopfler and I went along. They start playing. It's just indescribable what a mess it all is.
Wow.
We watch about 3 songs and Mark says to me, come on, let's go backstage and have a fag. So we go back into the dressing room. They're still banging out this crap. And Mike Campbell, the guitar player, walks into the dressing room. And Mark says, what are you doing in here? Because we can hear them down the kind of corridor. And Mike says, oh, I've just been sacked.
Great.
Mark says to him, what do you mean sacked? He said, oh, somebody will come in here in a few minutes and tell me I've been rehired. So he goes and gets a cup of tea. And Mark says to him, because Mark and I, when we went backstage, Mark said to me, he said, well, obviously they've not had any rehearsal time because it was so shambolic. And so Mark said to Campbell, he said, how long did you rehearse for this? And Campbell came out with a fantastic line. He said, we rehearsed for 8 weeks to play as badly as this. And Dylan was changing keys on him mid-song. He was stopping songs. Only Ben Montench, the keyboard player, had the faintest idea where they were. Wow. Songs would end when Stan Lynch, the drummer, just stopped. I mean, they didn't all stop together. Stan would keep going, and then he'd stop. The hall manager said to me that he'd been managing halls for 30 years, the largest number of refunds he'd ever been asked for. Wow, yeah. People were screaming out of this gig.
Was there a method behind it? Is it something Dylan wanted?
I can't. Well, one of the other questions was the most eccentric person you've met, and that would be Dylan.
Yeah.
And the two, I can't say Mo. It was an absolute shambles. The thing was, he was like a lot of those acts who reach a certain kind of age in the game, and they start pissing on their own catalogue. You know, Chuck Berry would be another one I can think of. People who just don't respect their own material or what the audience has come for.
Sure.
And I mean, Dylan did something that me as a manager, I mean, I immediately kind of went, oh, no. He comes off an 18-hour flight from Los Angeles and goes straight into a press conference. You don't do a press conference after an 18-hour flight.
Sure.
And the Australian journalist's first question to him is, really original question, why have you come to Australia, Bob? And Dylan says, for the money. And this goes out on the evening news and everything. And he came and played with the Straits in Melbourne. He had a day off. So Mark invited him to play. We had some quite young players in the group, Guy Fletcher, who some of you know on keyboards, who were not familiar with the Dylan, golden years. Sure. So Dylan comes down to the hall and rehearses 3 songs, gets up and plays 3 completely different songs.
Sounds about right.
And I'm standing stage left, and Guy turns to me and he says, what are we playing? I said, you're doing a song called Maggie's Farm, just mime. Just make it look like you're playing. Don't worry. And Dylan's guitar was so out of tune and so loud. In the middle of the song, Mark went over and actually turned it off. We used to call Dylan to his face rambling. Now, he thought we were talking about rambling Jack Elliott, but we weren't. We were talking about rambling Sid Rumpole.
Yes.
Around the horn. So I bought Dylan an audio set. You can get all those shows on audio cassette.
Yeah.
And I gave it to him in a little ribbon round it. And of course, he had no idea.
Sure. Well, everything you said sounds like a Van Morrison set, though, doesn't it?
Well, it was. I can do Van Morrison stories for the next hour and a half. If you want. Yeah,
when Van Morrison was going to get
they're of a similar ilk, similar personalities.
Yeah, how funny.
I mean, Mark did 2 albums with Dylan. And the first one was just one called Slow Train Coming, which we did in Must Shoals, Alabama.
Been there.
You can't go. You have? You can't go to a more obscure place, can you?
No, I went to, we did a session with Ruru, as they called her in Hong Kong.
You did that? Oh, right. Well,
Yeah, Ruru and the Lovers.
there were two guys, 2 Dylan fanatics, camping in a tent outside the studio. So every time we went out for ham and grits, which was all we ever ate there, we had to pass these 2 guys in the tent, and they would rush out. And I remember one day one of them said to Dylan, he said, "Oh, I saw you in Minneapolis in 1973. I was in row 6, seat C5." And Dylan turned to him and he said, "Yeah, I remember you." The guy goes, "Oh, wow." Rushes back into the tent. And Knopfler says to Rambling, he says, "What are you talking about? You don't remember him." And Dylan said, I thought it was a great line. He said, "Mark, it's just easier."
Oh.
Yeah.
Yes, right.
You mentioned a Southern delicacy. In '74, I was touring in the States. We're in Charlotte, Carolina, I think it is.
No, North Carolina.
Yeah, and it was midnight. We'd gone into a diner. I like the diners. The food's great.
Yeah.
We were a bit pissed, but it didn't matter. We were in a good mood. And I ordered a big fry-up. And on the side of this fry-up was this white splodge I'd never seen before, which is grits. And very politely, I said to this huge black lady who was serving, I said, "Excuse me, what are these? What is this?" She said, "There's grits, honey." Didn't help. So I wanted a bit more explanation. I said, what actually are they? Her explanation was, "Grits is grits." The diner had gone silent. And we all had long hair, so we thought, rather than find out what they were, we left.
I had a similar situation to that in New York years ago. I was in New York with Pete King, Ronnie Scott's partner, because I used to help the club, as Brian knows, which consisted of, Pete would ring me up and he'd go, I don't know how we are on the time of day for saying this kind of stuff, but I'm going to do it anyway. Pete would call me and he'd go, "Hello, you fucking." Say, "Oh, hello, Pete. How are you?" Yeah, "I need a new piano," and I would get them a piano. I mean, the pianos. I got 2 pianos for Ronnie's, including a Fagioli, and I don't know where that went after they sold it. Anyway, we're in New York and with a friend of ours who's since sadly passed away called John Elson, who was well known on the British London jazz scene. And Pete, a mate of John's, an African-American gentleman called Johnny Garry, who'd been a tour manager for Sarah Vaughn, came to join us one day. And the first thing when I was introduced to Johnny Garry, he said to me, "Do you want to see my bullet wound?" I said, "Not particularly." And he'd got a bullet, and some dubious drug deal Sarah Vaughan had been involved in. Somebody had shot Johnny Garry, who, being a faithful bodyguard, had leapt in front and taken the bullet straight through his shoulder. Anyway, he took us up to Harlem to a well-known restaurant up there called Sylvia's Kitchen. And we go in, and it was like the gunfighter coming into the saloon. The whole room went totally silent.
Yeah.
There are 3 white people with a black person and this is quite a number of years ago.
Yeah.
And the place went completely silent, and I was thinking, "Oh, holy shit." And Johnny Garry just turned to the room and he just said, "Don't worry, I'm training them." we got a round of applause for venturing into this, and had a fantastic meal, I got to say. Had a great time. And I remember we went to the Count Basie office because he was trying to book the Basie band for the club. And Brian and Clem will identify to this. And I got chatting to, I can't remember the guy who was leading the Basie band at the time, but he got into a rant about Buddy Rich when Buddy had played with them, and what an asshole he was to the rest of them back in 1948 or whatever it was. It's quite
Just a big band story. Derek Wadsworth told me about this. That the Maynard Ferguson band had a lot of British players in it, and they'd gone to America, and they were opening at the Carnegie Hall, and they're a bit apprehensive. And Derek looked through the curtain or whatever it is, and he could see the string section from the Chicago Symphony and Dizzy Gillespie. There's a whole bunch of faces in the audience. And the bass player is a guy called Dave Linnane, who he described as one of the hicks from the Sticks. Walking on, he says, "Come on, Les, let's put this town on the map."